All right, welcome in everyone to another deep dive. Today we're going deep on something, well, pretty technical really, but it has implications for the whole Indian tax system.
Absolutely.
We're talking about cost and management accountants, CMAs, and why they're pushing to be formally recognized as accountants under the Direct Tax Code. Now we've got a bunch of material from the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, ICMAI. And our mission here is to figure out what this all means, not just for accountants, but for you, the taxpayer.
Right, because when most people hear accountant in the context of taxes, they picture a chartered accountant. And this deep dive is going to challenge that assumption and introduce you to this whole other world of CMAs and the work they do.
Okay, so let's start with ICMAI itself.
Sure. They're not just some fly-by-night organization, established by an act of parliament all the way back in 1959.
Wow.
They've got a seriously large membership. Like, we're talking 100,000 professionals. Right. And get this, 750,000 students.
That's huge.
So when they make a request, people listen. This is a well-established body.
Makes sense.
With a ton of expertise.
All right, so their first big argument, and this is really interesting, is that taxation isn't just about crunching numbers. It's also about understanding the law.
Yeah, you got to know the rules of the game.
And it turns out the CMA curriculum actually spends a lot of time on direct taxation.
A lot of time, both at the intermediate and final levels.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We're talking about, deep dives into the Income Tax Act, all the rules, assessments, return filing, even tax planning strategies.
Interesting. So it's not just about the numbers.
Not at all. And what's even more interesting is the final level. Has this whole section on direct tax laws and international taxation.
So very legal perspective.
Exactly. It's about understanding the framework. And that aligns perfectly with what we call the strict interpretation,
right,
which is super important in tax law because things are very specific.
Gotcha. So precision is key.
Absolutely. Precision and a deep understanding of the legal side of things.
All right. So their next point revolves around how income is calculated for tax purposes.
And it's not just your typical accounting. There's a whole set of rules called Income Computation and Disclosure Standards, ICDS.
ICDS, okay.
And ICMAI makes this really interesting point about, the overlap between those ICDS and their own cost accounting standards, what they call CAS.
So common ground between the two.
A lot of it, for example, they both have guidelines on how to value inventory.
Okay, and why is that important?
Well, because inventory valuation can have a big impact on a company's profits. And that's, of course, a major focus for tax authorities.
Right, right.
So CMAs are already experts in this area. It's part of their core training.
To determine business income.
Yeah.
And that directly ties into taxable income.
Exactly. So they're already dealing with this crucial element of tax liability.
Now, here's something I found really fascinating in our research. Turns out cost accountants are already trusted with inventory valuation under existing legislation.
Right.
Now, our sources don't go into too much detail about the specific laws, but the point is, they're already doing this. Their expertise in cost accounting clearly qualifies them for it.
It makes sense.
And we just talked about how inventory valuation directly affects taxes.
It really makes you wonder why that recognition hasn't been broadened,
Right, right.
If they're deemed competent enough to handle something as tax sensitive as inventory valuation, then logically their expertise could be super valuable in other areas of the direct tax code as well.
So a potential for more integration there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so ICMAI also makes a big deal about their regulatory structure. They're a statutory body, which means they have the authority to regulate their own profession.
Right, and that includes disciplinary mechanisms like directorates, boards, committees, the whole nine yards.
Gotcha.
And they're constantly working to make those mechanisms even more independent.
Okay.
They also have a code of ethics and a peer review system to make sure everyone is maintaining high professional standards.
Sounds like they're really focused on accountability.
They are. It's all about ensuring competence and ethical behavior within their rank.
Which, makes their case for broader recognition even stronger.
Absolutely. It's a vital assurance of professionalism.
And speaking of recognition, they also highlight that they're already recognized under various VAT acts.
That's value-added tax, for those who aren't familiar.
Right, an indirect tax, and even by the high and Supreme Courts.
Exactly. So they're already trusted by both tax authorities and the highest levels of the judiciary.
So their expertise is clearly valued.
Very much so, both in regulatory and legal contexts.
And another interesting tidbit, ICMAI mentions that several expert committees have recommended, including cost accountants in the definition of accountant, for income tax purposes.
Now, these committees are independent bodies, so their recommendations carry a lot of weight.
It's not just ICMAI saying this.
Right. It's coming from external experts who have likely evaluated the skills and contributions CMAs could bring
to the tax system.
It adds a lot of credibility to their argument.
Definitely. And they also point out that including CMAs would essentially increase the pool of qualified tax advisors, which could lead to greater competition.
More options for taxpayers.
And that could mean better quality service, potentially more competitive pricing, and just more choice overall.
Preventing any one group from dominating the market?
Right. More competition is generally a good thing.
Absolutely. It can really drive efficiency and innovation.
So to recap, ICMAI emphasizes their comprehensive training in direct tax, which we've already discussed, but also in internal and cost audit,
giving them a very well-rounded understanding of financial matters.
They even offer certificate courses in specific areas like TDS and income tax return filing, so very practical applications of their knowledge.
And fundamentally, cost accounting builds upon those general accounting principles, so they have that strong foundation.
And in fact, a lot of CMAs are already working in tax roles within companies, providing consulting services, even without that formal DTC recognition.
They're already involved in GST, customs duties, the list goes on.
So they're already active players.
Very much so.
In the tax system, just not formally acknowledged in that specific way.
It's almost like the law hasn't quite caught up with reality.
Yeah, and finally, they mentioned that tax audit reports often take into account cost audit reports and cost accounting principles, so there's already that indirect link.
A connection that's being utilized but not fully formalized.
Right. So their overall argument is that including CMAs could actually support economic growth.
Makes sense, right? Improve tax compliance, a more efficient tax system, more professional opportunities, and ultimately better informed business decisions.
So it seems like excluding CMAs from the definition of accountant under the direct tax code might be overlooking their extensive training, their proven expertise, and all the potential benefits they could bring.
Not just to the tax system, but to the economy as a whole.
Exactly. So to wrap this up, I want to leave you with a question. Given ICMI's long history and the fact that cost accounting is already used within the tax system, why do you think this separation still exists? And what might we see happen in the future to bridge this gap and really utilize all of the financial expertise that India has to offer? It's a question worth pondering.
It definitely is. Thanks for joining us.